So I'm recording this since we had issues with recording it, the sermon yesterday, and so I'll kind of go over it again. And first I'd like to read the passage of Scripture, and I'll be reading from Matthew 7, verses 1 through 6, if you'd like to follow along. It says, "Do not judge so that you won't be judged, for with the judgment you use, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but don't notice the log in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, 'Let me take the speck out of your eye,' and look, there's a log in your eye? Hypocrite, first take the log out of your eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. Don't give what is holy to dogs, or toss your pearls before pigs, or they will trample them with their feet, turn and tear you to pieces." So we all have the tendency to criticize and judge. We try not to, but, as the excuse goes, we're all human. But Jesus tells us that we are not to judge. And so we're going to look at that. And there's a family that when they returned from Sunday morning service, the father had criticized the sermon. The daughter thought the choir singing was off key, and the mother found fault with the organist playing. But the subject had to be dropped when the small boy of the family said, "But it was a good show for nickel. Don't you think, Dad?" So as we see, we tend to judge, and we can judge. This family judged, but of course it had to be dropped when the son pointed out that, maybe they weren't giving the amount that they should in the offering plate, and so it was a good show for a nickel. But we laugh at that, but what do we judge? Who do we judge? And in the first part of this passage that I read, it talks about the measure that will be used, and it will be measured to you also. And we use measurements for many things. We cook with it. We check height. Probably many of us in our homes have the height of our kids as they were growing and the different levels that we set. And as they grow up, and maybe even some of us adults have our heights measured there too. We measure weight, what our weight is, what the weight of food is, how much we're paying for it. We measure distance, and we do that out here, especially when we're giving directions. Distance is important, how many miles it is from one place to the other. And as we learn quickly moving out here, when they tell you it's 2 miles, it's 2 miles. So you learn distance. But then do we apply it to each other? Do we have a measurement that we use towards others, but yet we don't use it towards ourselves? Our expectations of others, our ideas of how others should be. And sometimes those measurements are not possible to live up to and to measure up to. And sometimes those measurements we use towards others we don't require of ourselves. And when we are judged by the same measure, sometimes that we use, we also tend to complain and whine. And we see that a lot in society today. When the measure is used against them, they complain and whine and get upset, and they don't like it. James 5 tells us that brothers, do not complain about one another so that you will not be judged. So we shouldn't complain. And the measure that we use again will be used against us, the measure that we use against others. And so what bothers us in others is usually also the problems that we have. And what we find a lot of times is that we are dealing with issues, and we project those problems onto others. And so a lot of times we find fault with others because of the fault we find in ourselves. We also may be envious of what the other person has or received, so we find fault with them. That could be even in the case of a job where a promotion is given to somebody else, and we become jealous and envious of what they have received. And so we have a tendency to judge them and to use a measure against them that is unfair. We also deal with envy and selfishness. In James 3:16, he tells us, "For where envy and selfish ambition exist, there is disorder and every kind of evil." And the key word being there, selfish. And we see that as, I think, one of the key issues with throughout the Sermon on the Mount is that a lot of the issues that Jesus talks about deals with selfishness, being selfish. We commit adultery because we're selfish. We are angry because we're selfish. And there's many others. And we judge, which can mean either to analyze, evaluate, or decide, or it could mean to condemn. So to judge someone can mean two different things, really. And then one is to help the person, and the other is to condemn. And we are told not to judge harshly. And then Jesus gives us an example, one that sometimes maybe we chuckle at. But in it, he talks about the log in your eye. How can you remove the speck out of the other person's eye when you have this log in your eye? And also another example that I want to use, and that kind of goes along with this, Matthew Henry says that the snuffers of the sanctuary are to be pure gold. And if you look in Exodus 37:23, we read where the lamps and the snuffers were of pure gold. And those snuffers, and some churches still use them, they were designed they were long and had a hook on it. One end would light the candle, and the other end had a little bell on it that would put the fire out, put the candle out. And Matthew Henry is saying that we are to be like those snuffers. They were made of pure gold, the purest gold. And when we help others and try to snuff out their flames of evilness and sin, we have to make sure that we are pure gold. And we do that by examining ourselves and removing any logs or any issues that we have in our own life, and getting the logs out of our lives. Because we cannot help another person until we have cleared what is blocking our sight and our internal light. And you remember Jesus talked about light and darkness. And those logs that are in our eye block that internal light. And we can't be critical of the other people's sin until we've removed our sin. We can't remove that speck out of their eye until we removed the sin in our own life. We must remove the log from our eye. And if we don't, then what Paul states in Romans 2:1-3 will happen. And I'll read that to you. And in Romans chapter 2, verses 1-3, he says, "Therefore, any of you who judges is without excuse. For when you judge another, you condemn yourself, since you, the judge, do the same things. We know that God's judgment on those who do such things is based on the truth. Do you really think, any one of you who judges those who do such things yet do the same, that you will escape God's judgment?" So in that, Paul is telling us that we will not escape judgment. And even those of us that judge others in the way of condemning others, and yet we still do the same thing that we are condemning the other person of, and we will be judged. And so we are not to do that. And again, we do not judge to condemn. We judge to correct and to help. And another example of this is Jesus and the prostitute that is about to be stoned. And if you remember, in that story, Jesus is asked and is told what this woman was caught doing, committing adultery, being a prostitute. And by the law, she should have been stoned to death. And Jesus, and I think that he probably did pick up a stone and was about maybe to even throw it. And he would have every right to do, because he, of all people, would be the one that could do it. But instead he turned to those that were accusing her and had their stones in their hand. And he turned to them and said, you that is without sin, cast the first stone." And I'd like to think that probably one by one, each one dropped their stone and walked away until there was none left. And Jesus turned to the woman and of course said, "Where are your accusers?" And then he told her to go and sin no more. And so he did not judge. He forgave. And in a way, he also corrected by telling her to stop doing what she is doing. And so we can ask ourselves, do I have the same issue that I am judging this person on? If I'm trying to correct somebody, or if I'm correcting them in a sin that they are committing, am I pure? Do I have any sin in my heart? And then Jesus closes this out with a warning. And he talks about righteousness and pearls. And he talks about the pearls. And I think those would be like pearls of knowledge. And we are to not throw those. And we would not throw those to pigs. We would not throw our pearls to pigs. And what he's telling us here is that we have to be careful when helping others. Galatians 6:1 says, brothers, if someone is caught in any wrongdoing, you who are spiritual should restore such a person with a gentle spirit, watching out for yourselves so you won't be tempted. What we say or do may be rejected by that person. But we have to, and if we have shared what the Lord has put on our heart to that person, then we have done what we have been asked to do. And if we are pure of heart, then it'll have the proper effect. But if it doesn't, then we are to just go on. We did what we were asked to do, but we continue to pray. Because if we keep on with them, keep going on about them and about their issues, they will eventually find something wrong with us. And then they will turn on us. But remember, you've planted the seed. So just move on and continue to pray. And someone else will come along and will reinforce what you've said, and may even have the opportunity to help them correct their sin and to bring them to Christ and closer to Christ. So be careful who you talk to. And if God has told you to, then speak with them. Correct them. We are told to correct each other. As a church, as a body of the church, we are to correct each other and encourage each other, instruct each other. And the judgment is to help each other become better people, become holier and closer to Christ. So in conclusion, don't hesitate to help others. We are commanded to do that. But be careful. Make sure that what you are applying to them has been applied to your personal life as well. Remove the logs from your eye. So I ask you, do you have any logs in your eye? If so, take the time today to confess it to Christ and have it removed. It is a painless procedure. We know there's many procedures that is done that on the eye today that we wouldn't thought would have been possible 20, 30 years ago. And those procedures that were done are done even more often today and without any problem. But I tell you that this procedure will be completely painless, and you will have a clear view, clear sight to help remove that tiny little speck that is in that other person's eye. But in order to be in the position to help others, you need to be able to be pure and to trust Jesus. And so I encourage you to do that, to remove the log from your eye. And if you do feel like you need to correct somebody, make sure you examine yourself. And I pray that you will do that.